my Jersey crew over there standing up? Thank you very much. The Jersey love, I appreciate it. Amal, I don't understand him. He is Jersey. He's Jersey ACLU, but he stands up here and says, I'm SABA NY, SABA. You're SABA Nuj, SABA Nuj, not SABA. There's a great book by Alice Walker that talks about revolutionaries, and she says the real revolutionary is always concerned with the least glamorous stuff. The raising a child's reading level from 3rd grade to 4th, the filling out food stamps forms for folks because they got to eat, revolution or not. The real revolutionary is always close enough to the people to be there for them when they're needed. In New Jersey, in Newark, we have a revolutionary force, a man that lives that spirit, and I just want to please give a round of applause for Amal and for all of these things. People in distinguished positions, but please allow me a personal point before I get into my keynote remarks. We all are leaning on each other these days. I feel like Shiva, the god of destruction, is hitting America, and out of that, she is so important because out of that comes rebirth and growth, but right now I'm feeling the destruction. And one of the people that I personally have been leaning on because of his voice, how he speaks to my intellect, how he speaks to my heart and speaks to my spirit, is Preet Bharara, and I just want to give him my gratitude. You know, when I went to Oxford and I studied, I fell in love with the works of Gandhi, and I shaved my head, Preet, and became a vegan. I don't know what you're thinking about, man. Come on. Join us. Be more Gandhian, sir. I have to say, this has been one of the tougher weeks in my life as an American, period. I started on Monday down in McAllen, Texas. I went into Mexico, coming back across. I got stopped by 3 Customs and Border Patrol. Not when I got to the United States Customs and Border point, but in the middle of the bridge. They were stationed there to turn away people seeking asylum. And it was one of those heartbreaking periods. It's been one of those weeks where I got back to the Senate and then got the gut punch that our Supreme Court likely, not without a fight, but could potentially change in a very dramatic fashion. And amidst all of these big things going on, it really made me think about today, where I knew I would feel a connection with folks who are of a darker hue, folks who've come through a different way to this great American tapestry. And folks who, in my opinion, are extraordinarily powerful. Alice Walker, that same author I mentioned earlier, she has this quote where she says, the most common way people give up their power is not realizing they have it in the first place. The Indian community in America, the South Asian community in America, is one of the more powerful communities there are. I spoke to this incredible political action group recently and really called them that they're powerful in every area, from the sciences to education to business, but in politics, in the space of civic activity, with so few South Asians elected to office. I encourage them to continue in that effort to manifest power in every way. But today, as I confess to you that my heart is a little heavy, I would really like to leave with you all just one message through 2 stories. And that's often the message that we forget, that we allow our inability to do everything in life with the big problems to undermine our determination to do something. We forget that in every moment of our life, every single moment, we have one choice to make over and over and over again. And that's to accept things as they are, or take responsibility for changing them. And it's so easy to get caught up in what I call a state of sedentary agitation. When you get so upset about what you're seeing, trust me, I do it, I make the mistake sometimes. Sometimes I'm sitting home at night watching Rachel and I'm getting so upset. I'm like, somebody should do something. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a United States Senator. But I call upon you tonight and really wanted to leave you with this message. Everyone individually, there will be people up here with titles, people up here with positions. I just want everyone to know that where your power comes from has nothing to do about your position. That life is not about celebrity, it's about significance. It's not about position, it's about purpose. It's about how you make that decision in the small moments of your life. If I could leave you with that message in these two stories, that what you do every day, every moment matters, then I've achieved something in this incredibly generous invitation to come and share with you all tonight. And please understand that this for me is cathartic and healing, because I have to remind myself of that all the time. I worry that we forget this in our interactions with each other. I tell the story of the two hugs. I watched Chris Christie, who is a friend. I could write a dissertation about my disagreements, but I see his dignity, I see his humanity. I don't believe that you can ascribe to calling yourself a patriot. Patriotism is love of country, and you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. We don't always have to agree with one another. Sometimes we don't always have to like each other, but love means you see the person's worth, you see the person's dignity. And I still remember being so upset when they were pillaring Chris Christie in the presidential primary debates for hugging Barack Obama. And it was that hug when Barack Obama flew in after Hurricane Sandy and he was walking down the steps. Everybody was hurting in grief. The two men hugged, and I'm a hugger. It wasn't even a good hug. It was one of those awkward male hugs. Like, what do I do with my hand? How much of the body do I pull in here? And then, you know, he gets pilloried for that, but then just months ago, when I was on the Senate floor, John McCain comes after getting what could be a terminal cancer diagnosis. I crossed the Senate floor to hug him, and I gave him one hell of a bear hug, man. And then I get home that night and I'm getting killed on Twitter by people on my side of the aisle for hugging John McCain. And so what I want to talk to you all about tonight, really, and I don't want to stand here and praise you or pander to this incredible community around me. I just hope to inspire you in ways that I need to be inspired right now with my heart that's hurting. And I'm one of these people that's going to tell you right now, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. Because we don't always do what's right as a country. There are things happening, whether it's mass shootings, like we saw this week, or what we see in immigration enforcement, or what we see in our prisons and jails every day. And so this first story, forgive me if it sounds a little convoluted, but it's going to make a point, and I'm going to make the second point, and I'm going to be done. But forgive me if this point sounds convoluted, but this was back when I was a college football player, and please understand me, I used to be chiseled. Just close your eyes and imagine me right now. Chiseled. I had to register these guns with this New Jersey police. I was chiseled then. Now I just jiggle, but I swear. And I was getting on a plane, this packed plane, going this 3,000-mile journey, and it was packed, and I'm in coach. These were the days before I had any frequent flyer miles for upgrades, and I'm like this 6'3" chiseled man sitting there. Everybody's cattle calling, fighting for overhead space, and I sit in my seat, and suddenly the door to the plane closes, and I look around, and I realize every seat in coach is taken except for the two next to me. And I came to the only obvious conclusion, that God loved me more than all of these people. I mean, come on. And I'm just sitting there singing my hymns to myself. Yes, Jesus loves me. and all these people are looking at me and, you smug man. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm chiseled. And then all of a sudden the door to the plane opens and the cabin fills with these screams, like somebody is getting violently attacked. We all stop and we're looking through the door. What beast is going to walk through? And then through the door, this three-headed beast came in. It was a mother with a little boy and a baby. And this was not a normal baby. I swear it was part of, it was supposed to be an X-Man because it was all lung. It was like a woofer and tweeter. And then it starts walking down the aisle like it's the Green Mile because everybody knows where these kids and this mother is going. And I swear I can read everybody's mind on the plane. It serves you right, you smug, chiseled man. And then don't ever let anybody ever tell you that there's no such thing as a stupid question. I have asked many stupid questions, and this was one of these moments. The woman comes to my row and says, "Excuse me, sir, I'm sitting here." And I look up at her and I say, "Are you sure?" And she comes in, baby crying, 3 bodies, 2 seats. And I'm thinking to myself, Lord, why hast thou forsaken me? And now I'm sitting there, and suddenly I have that evolved thought somehow got into my teenage brain. I suddenly thought that this is either going to be the worst flight of my life, and I could surrender to that, or I could try to make this the best flight of my life. Cynicism is a refuge for cowards. People who are cynical about the state of affairs, and they divorce themselves from them and do nothing. And doing nothing is the worst thing. King talked about this. He said what we will have to repent for in this day and age is not the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, but the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. There should never be a moment that we surrender our power, even in something as simple as a plane flight. And so I turned to this woman and I decided, you know what, I'm going to make this the best flight of my life. And I started making faces, contorting my face at this baby, trying to stop it from crying. And finally the baby settled down. I started talking to the mother, and as soon as I got out of my drama, my self-absorbed drama, I suddenly realized that this mom was having the worst time on the plane, as if people were cutting her with their eyes, as if she stood outside of the plane and looked at her baby and said, okay, cry as loud as you can now. And finally the plane took off, the baby was quiet, she and I are talking, we diffused the tension in the air, and we're just having fun. Eventually, I don't remember the movies from any flights I've ever taken, but I remember this one because it was so meaningful. It was the movie Glory with Denzel Washington, where he goes like this, and he's getting beaten. Oh, it was an amazing movie. And she's like, I haven't seen the movie in so long. And I'm like, you watch this movie, I'm gonna watch over your kid. And then as soon as the movie's on, I then started torturing that kid with all the best jokes I had. Like, why did Tigger and Eeyore have their heads in the toilet? Because they were looking for poo. I'm like cracking this kid up. He's the best audience I have ever had. And we're just having a great time. How many tickles does it take to make an octopus laugh? Tentacles. 10 tickles. Oh, you guys are a bad audience. Tough audience. The plane lands in such a quick flight. 6 hours went by like this. And I'm having the greatest time. We exchange addresses, say we'll keep in touch. We don't keep in touch. 5 years passed, 10 years passed, 15 years passed, and I'm in a bad situation. A young guy trying to run for mayor in the city of Newark, and I'm getting pummeled. I'm down, I'm hurting like I'm hurting this week. And then I get this letter in the mail saying, you may not remember me, but I met you on a cross-country flight. It was the first time I ever flew with my kids, and I thought it was going to be one of the worst experiences, most difficult experiences, but God saw fit to have me sit next to you. And then she went on to say that her family owned a big factory in Newark. She invited me to the factory. I talked to all of her workers. They ended up becoming some of the best volunteers on my campaign. They became something politicians love, campaign contributors. And the amazing thing is that little boy that I tortured with my jokes and who must have had to go through therapy for years, he ended up becoming one of our best campaign volunteers and workers. I say all this to say is that energy cannot be destroyed. I was with this physicist, this incredible physicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, for his Star Talk, for his podcast. And I know I'm in a crowd of geeks and nerds that you're applauding. Oh, a physicist, wonderful, wonderful. All the lawyers who feel guilty because their parents wanted them to be doctors. I know the crowd I'm in, people. But I said to him, those stars we see in the sky, they're millions of light years away, yeah, right? He goes, yes, they are, Cory. And he goes to me, he goes, it takes millions of years for the light to reach here. And I go, so some of those stars could be dead and gone, right? And he goes, yeah, but we still see them as if they're there. He goes, yes, because their energy goes on forever in perpetuity. That's what we are as human beings. The second story is simple. I stand here bathing in the light and the warmth of generations long gone, people whose names I don't know. My dad was born poor to a single mom. And he would just torture me with stories because I knew he wasn't telling the truth, because the stories of my dad's childhood would get worse the older I got. It's like, soon he was heckling me if I called him poor. Boy, don't tell people I was poor. I was just po, P-O. I couldn't afford the other two letters. I was a po boy from North Carolina. And when his mom couldn't take care of him, it was people in the community that brought him in. People that weren't even his blood relatives. They put a roof over us, had food on the table. We had no college in my family's history. It was back to slavery, poverty, back to slavery, with people in the community, not our blood relatives, who told him, you're going to college. We couldn't afford to go and enroll. Thought he'd have to go get a job and just go to work like so many others he knew. They said, no, we're taking a collection at the church. And they got enough money together to give him enough cash to enroll in college and then work his way through a small historically black college in North Carolina. And just think about, what's the ROI on those people that put the dollar bills? I bathed in their warmth. When he got down to college, it was the 1960s, and you all know the sitting movement started in 61 in North Carolina, and my father said he was blown away. All the great movements in this country that have achieved things were multiracial, multi-religious, and he saw these diverse coalitions coming together, sitting in at lunch counters, people having hot coffee poured on their heads, spit and kicked and dragged off lunch stools to open up opportunity for him, and it worked. By the time he moved to Washington, D.C., thanks to the activism in that city, people opened up doors for him no blacks had ever worked. In some of the companies, he was the first black foreign oil company, first black hired for a department store, and then became IBM's first black salesman in the Virginia area. And what happens when you lower barriers and allow diverse people to the table? Women, minorities, gay and lesbian folks, they contribute. My dad was now the top 5% of their global salesmen, gets a promotion up to New Jersey, and guess what? He's working in the Manhattan office, but people won't show him homes in New Jersey because of the color of his skin. Every time he goes to a place with great schools, in suburban neighborhoods, they tell him, oh, I'm sorry, this house is sold, you can't, oh, I'm sorry, this house was pulled off the market. And so my father found this great group of activists who were the Fair Housing Council, who were working with these group of lawyers. And they all banded together to set up a sting operation. I met one of these couples yesterday. They came up to me, elderly couple, and said, we used to be test couples in Bergen County when your parents were looking for a home. And my parents would go look at a house, they would be told it's sold. The test couple would come, find out the house was still for sale. On the house that I grew up in, my parents told me that they came and they were told, oh, I'm sorry, this house is sold. They left, the white couple comes, still finds a house for sale. And amazingly, the white couple puts a proxy bid, the bid's accepted, papers are drawn up. And then on the day of the closing, the white couple does not show up. My father does, and a volunteer lawyer. And when they walk in, the real estate agent is sort of shocked to see him, and the lawyer walks over and says, you're in violation of New Jersey fair housing law. And guess what? The real estate agent doesn't give up, doesn't capitulate. He stands up and punches my dad's lawyer in the face and sings a dog on my dad. And I'm telling you, every time my dad would tell the story as I was growing up, the dog would get bigger. Eventually, when I was 18 years old and chiseled, and I was walking around the house, my dad would be like, boy, don't you walk around this house like you hit a triple. You were born on third base, young man. I had to fight a pack of wolves to get you in this house. Patriotism, love of country. You cannot love your country unless you love your countrymen and women. I think about the love of generations gone by. I don't know the names of those people that sat on lunch counters, ordinary Americans. I don't know the names of the people who put dollar bills in collection plates. I don't know names of those folks who worked to get companies to open their doors to give my dad a shot. I didn't even know the names of the lawyers involved in getting my family in that home. I found out, I'm embarrassed to tell you, I found out when I was a senator. I went to do what a lot of senators do, have a high self-regard for themselves. We write books. And so I went to write my book, and I had to fact check. If you have a dad like mine, you gotta fact check everything. And so I go back to try to find the head of the Fair Housing Council. And from the 1960s, she was easy to find because she is still head of the Fair Housing Council today. She is 92 years old. Her name is Miss Lee Porter. And now, she doesn't represent black families. This African-American woman represents Muslim families. She represents same-sex couples. And why is she still doing it? Because she knows that your justice is my justice. Your oppression is my oppression. That we are all caught in that inescapable network of mutuality, tied in that common garment of destiny. But this is the last part of that story, the message I want to leave you with. I went to find the lawyers who gave a little bit of their time. She sent me to find the head lawyer, a retired New Jersey judge named Arthur Leslie. And at the time, in the early 1960s, he was just starting his business, like many of the people I met tonight, just starting out. And he was struggling to make his private company go. And I asked him, though, with all that going on, with the struggling you had, why would you help black families? You're a white guy from the suburbs of New Jersey. Why would you help black families move into your neighborhood? And this is what he told me. He said, I remember the day that I made the decision. I was sitting on my couch comfortable, watching TV. And this was back in the days, you all know this, when we only had like 3.5 channels. So all America was watching this Sunday evening movie called Judgment at Nuremberg, about the Holocaust. And he says he's watching the movie, and he was stunned to see breaking news break in. You guys turn on CNN now, it's like every 10 seconds, breaking news, Melania has a jacket. But this was real breaking news. They did something rare. They pulled away from a movie to show a bridge in Alabama called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. You see, these marchers had begun in Selma for voting rights to try to march from Selma to Montgomery, and they get stopped on this bridge. And he says he's watching as these folks are confronted by Alabama state troopers with masks and billy clubs and gas. And they decide to turn around. The marchers were going to turn around, but they thought that first they would kneel and pray. And just as they're kneeling to pray, the Alabama state troopers shot gas at them and then stormed into them with billy clubs, going back and forth, bashing people over the head. A woman named Miss Boynton knocked unconscious. A man named John Lewis, head split open, bled that bridge red. These 600 marchers scattered and ran in fear, in terror, as these people beat and beat them. And he said he was sitting there comfortably on his couch in the suburbs of New Jersey, and he did not get caught in a state of sedentary agitation. This was his country. He didn't have a position or a title. This was his country. And he knew that he had a choice to make, to accept things as they are or take responsibility for changing them. And so he went to work the next day and he told his partner, Leo, we got to go to Alabama. And Leo laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was preposterous. They couldn't afford a ticket. They couldn't afford to close their business. And so the two men just sat there for a moment, and then in essence they realized, why don't we just do the best we can with what we have where we are? And they got on the phone and started calling folk up. And they found people just asking, do you need a lawyer? Does anybody need some legal help to deal with any issues involving social justice, involving race in America? And they found this woman named Lee Porter, this young woman who was like, hallelujah, yes, I need some lawyers. And they went to work with Miss Lee Porter, and 4 years later, they get some case file that has the name on it, Cory and Carolyn Booker. I'm telling you right now, this is what I call a conspiracy of love. It's a force, it's an energy, and people get seduced into this idea of the great man theory of American history, that somehow we're here because these Titans dropped down from Olympus and led us forward, Jefferson and Lincoln and Washington. No. The story of this country is the story of ordinary Americans who took responsibility, who looked at each other and saw the worth and the dignity and chose to love. Love is not a being verb. It's been watered down. It's made to be saccharine in our common speech, but love. Gandhi talked about that. King talked about that. This idea of courageous love to create a beloved community. And I am here factually because of that chain reaction, that virtuous virus of love. There's people on this bridge, didn't even realize it, but they're standing up that day, even though they didn't make their destination, they were driven back. They released an energy into the universe that instantaneously leapt 1,000 miles and changed the heart of one man on a couch in New Jersey, who would then go on and change the destiny of generations yet unborn. I am a U.S. Senator because of this kind of love. Every one of us is here because of this kind of love. I tell you, in the nation now where the tribalism has become deeper, where my office gets calls about people in a New Jersey transit stop being heckled because they're sick, heckled because of the color of their sin. This now is a time that we have a choice to accept this as it is or take responsibility for changing it. I'm coming back, flying back to McLean, Texas. I sit down. You do not want to sit next to me on a plane because I will tell you jokes. An Indian man sits next to me. We start talking. He tells me, where have you been? Oh, I want to take my family. Where should I go? Can I get some information about where me and my kids can volunteer? And I go, well, why would you do that? He goes, Cory, because my family, the Indian family, we lived in Uganda. And the horrible situation back around the time I was born, I was just a baby, was so bad my family had to flee Uganda. He told me the story, the inhumanity of on their way to the airport, hoping they can get out. The military stopped them, and they wouldn't let them go until her mother gave away all of her jewels, her wedding ring. They took the watch off of his father's wrists. And then he said they came here to America with nothing, no money in their pocket at all, had been stripped from them, just the clothes on their back. And he said it was someone here in New York City that didn't even know them, that brought them into their two-family home and gave 5 people one of the bedrooms. And this man looked at me, understanding that he, as an Indian American, how he got here, and he said he knew he could not pay it backwards. There's only one thing he could do, which was pay it forward. And so he wanted to go to the border and help El Salvadorian and Honduran Guatemalans. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, if I can give you anything, if you could leave here thinking one thing, it's to remember that this nation now is in desperate need of love. It's in desperate need of people who see the dignity and the worth of all humanity. It's in desperate need of people who don't talk about the problems, but be about the solution. I want to end with just this one note. I'm hurting. I really am. But this nation gave me the gift. When I moved into the Central Ward of Newark, it's this woman on the 5th floor of the projects whose son was murdered in the lobby of the building I live. She taught me that hope does not exist in the abstract. That hope is a response. It's relational. You cannot have great hope without great despair. That hope is this active conviction that despair will never have the last word. And so I ask you right now, this nation's history was formed by everyday Americans who responded to darkness with their light, everyday Americans who responded to hate with love, everyday Americans who responded to bitterness and subjugation and bigotry with the continuance of a spirit that is continued for generations of Americans that have made this nation what it is today, and you and I and all of us in this room. This organization itself did not just come together for parties or for fun. It came together with a mission and a purpose to defend values, to advance ideals, to bring forth the strength that comes through collective action. And I know that we may not have been envisioned by our founding fathers. They may not have had us in their mind's eye when they thought about what the future of America will look like. But I tell you right now, if we invest in energy and love, if we are willing to plant trees under whose shade we will never sit, if we are willing to plant seeds for a harvest that we may never enjoy, if we put love into the universe, we, like those stars, may be dead and gone, but this nation will feel our warmth, and generations yet to come might be able to stand up and truly say that we are a nation with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.